Loki episode 3 aired this morning on Disney Plus, and after the much talked about cliffhanger of Loki episode 2, obviously the curiosity going into this episode was at an all-time high. At least from me, because what Lady Loki did at the end of episode 2 created major ramifications for things to come in the future. Now, this episode also revealed some very interesting things, not to mention that this episode took a dramatic shift in a different direction. I was thinking they would at least begin to explain what happened. And as a fan of, fictional comic book stories, we all know that Lady Loki, with what she did at the end of episode 2 and what they showed in the TVA headquarters, created multiple timelines and multiple universes and sort of sprung on the multiverse. But it would have been nice to have had it actually explained. That's not what happened here. This episode really shifted directions. Prior to this episode, the show was really a cat and mouse type of show with the TVA, Mobius and Loki trying to find the other Loki, which wound up being Lady Loki, and kind of ended with this episode being more of like a wacky buddy cop type of show. The thing about Loki is it really is carried by the charisma of Tom Hiddleston. In this episode, there was no Owen Wilson, so he had to basically work alongside Lady Loki. The actress who plays Lady Loki is an English actress named Sophia Di Martino. And this show is kind of a wacky, quirky show. And she fits right in because I gotta put her over. She really was great alongside Tom Hiddleston. They really do have chemistry. And now I'm starting to really realize the talent this man has. Like, I know Loki was like the one character that was a constant throughout the MCU phase 1, 2, and 3 as far as villains go, even though he wasn't always a villain. And I want to see this continue. Now looking back on it and looking at what happened in this episode, I kind of want Loki to stick around. I don't know what his contract is. I don't know how it works, but I would like Loki to stick around for phase 4 because he really does breathe life into the MCU. The opening shot of this episode with the two women having drinks or whatever, and of course it turned out it was a TVA worker and Lady Loki and she's reading her mind. This scene was very Tarantino-esque. Like, they're having an exchange of dialogue in a bar, having drinks or whatever, and it really reminded me of the opening scene in Pulp Fiction. So as I was saying, this episode changes things around because this episode was not about Loki chasing after Lady Loki. What happens is Lady Loki makes it to TVA headquarters, and then she's going around fighting the TVA, disintegrating them. Regular male Loki follows her in, and he's trying to make a truce with her still, and they both get warped out of there. And they basically end up in Lamentis 1, the year 2077, even further into the future. And what's happening on this planet is it's about to be destroyed. And they have to get off this planet on this ship before it gets destroyed. So it really becomes this buddy cop episode and really sort of delves into the mind of both Lokis. Lady Loki reveals that her name, she doesn't like to be called Loki. She reveals that she wants to be called Sylvie. But I guess she used to be Loki, but Sylvie it is. And there's some comedy here, a lot of quirk. Loki shapeshifting, getting blasted. There's a really cool scene too with Loki talking about his adoption. And there's also a tremendous speech I want to put over where Loki says love is like a dagger. Anybody who's ever been in love and had their heart broken or had a breakup, you know that that's true. Like, I don't know where they got that from, if it was the comics or if it was just good writing. But man, that was on point, yo. That was on point. The plot of this episode is that Loki and Lady Loki, after having some conversations, decide that if they get on that ship to leave the planet that's about to explode, because she already knows what happens, the ship never makes it off the planet. But Loki thinks if they can go on it and sort of change the timeline, they can leave the planet, charge the little time thing, and get out of there. That's the way I interpret it anyways. It was a bit confusing. Unfortunately, though, it doesn't happen. Now, there is a really cool fight scene I want to talk about close to the end of the episode where they had this spinning camera And it gives off the illusion of it being one take. It was not one take. It's the old one take trickery. They did it with the movie 1917 as well. But I really enjoyed that though. Like, it was quick action, it was fun. And we find out there was a big revelation here that I want to talk about. We find out from Lady Loki that all the workers of the TVA were actually variants. The TVA lied. And I talked about it in a video a couple days ago, and I've talked about it before. Other people have talked about how the TVA may actually not be the good guys here. They may have either the theory of them being evil could be true, or at least misleading people. There could be truth to it, because that's a straight up lie. Lady Loki, or Sylvie that is, reveals that the employees had a life before working for them. So Loki was lied to. And he thought that the timekeepers created them, like manifested them out of thin air. So does that mean that, like, Mobius also has a life beforehand? I don't know. But that was an interesting revelation, because this idea of Loki and Sylvie being the villains and the TVA being the good guys may have just been flipped on its head. Now, I'm not saying that everybody who works for the TVA is bad, because I don't think they are. But the TVA trying to control the Prime timeline and prevent it from splintering off, it does come off like, again, it comes off like a little bit too controlling. And that's not always something that is a good thing. I mean, don't forget episode 1, if you're late for work, you're going to make another timeline and you might be disintegrated. Like, that's a bit extreme, I would say. Plus, if there aren't other multiverses, where did this Loki come from? I talked about that before. Like, there's a lot of unanswered questions here. And I certainly hope those questions get answered by the end of this series, because if not, it's going to be really annoying. I want to know where Lady Loki, Sylvie came from. They gave a little bit of information about her in this episode, but not a lot. Not a lot. And I want to know what's going on. I've seen some people theorize that Kang the Conqueror is actually the one who's kind of misleading the TVA. I don't know about that. Like, Kang the Conqueror was rumored for Avengers Endgame. When we found out through the leaks that Avengers Endgame had time travel, there was a lot of theories that Kang the Conqueror was going to be the villain, not Thanos from 2014. It was going to be Kang the Conqueror as the villain of Endgame. That didn't happen. But I feel like with the multiverse being set up here for Phase 4, I think that having Kang the Conqueror in Phase 4 could work better than squeezing him into Endgame. Build him up more and do it. But this episode was enjoyable, although there were some parts where I was kind of like thinking, okay, speed it along. Like, it was a bit slow. I didn't enjoy it as much as the first 2 episodes. And a lot of it was sort of a retread. Things about Loki's character we already knew, along with some insightful stuff. But really, it all came down to, some fun stuff, some comedy, a little bit of that. Not the best episode, not one that I'm gonna, like, thirst over or whatever, that I'm gonna gloriously promote. Didn't hate it, but I am kind of looking for answers here, because we have a lot of unanswered questions. And I'm not trying to be impatient. I just feel like they could have done more with this. And I was kind of hoping that if it is going to become a buddy cop story, it wouldn't just be Loki and Sylvie trapped on, in this timeline, trapped on this planet Lamentus 1 in the year 2077. I hope it's more than that. We'll see what happens. But anyways, that's what I thought about this episode. What did you think? Let me know in the comments. I thank you again for watching. And we'll talk more about this, I'm sure, as the days and weeks go by. Episode 4 is next week, and I hope we get more answers then.